I never thought I'd live to see the day my own son would throw me out like a piece of trash. But there I was, 80 years old, standing on the cracked sidewalk in front of the house I had paid rent on for 15 years, with 2 worn-out duffel bags at my feet. The air was damp and cold that morning, but colder still were the words Daniel hissed at me before he slammed the door. "You're dead weight, Dad. You won't see a dime of my money. My money." That's what he called it. My son had just claimed a $4.2 million lottery prize using the ticket I'd bought with my own cash in my own name. He didn't even flinch when he said it. No hesitation, no shame. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and tell us where you're listening from. That day is burned into me like a scar. I can still see him standing in the doorway, hair slicked back, wearing cologne he couldn't afford a week earlier. The look on his face wasn't pride, it was victory, as if throwing his old man to the curb was some kind of achievement. I tried to speak. My throat caught on the words. "Daniel, the ticket is in my name. I've played those numbers for 20 years, he sneered. "Yeah, well, I'm the one who claimed it." "And the world doesn't give prizes for persistence, Dad. It gives prizes to winners." Then the door slammed. The lock clicked, and I was left staring at my own reflection in the dusty window. An old man, whose entire life of sacrifice had just been dismissed in a single sentence. Neighbors peeked through curtains as I shuffled down the porch steps. Not one of them came outside. Not one said a word. Just me, the bags, and the echo of his contempt ringing in my ears. I sat on the curb, my hands shaking. Not from the cold, but from disbelief. How did we get here? How did a son I raised with every ounce of sweat in my body turn me into nothing more than an obstacle to his new life? That morning wasn't just a betrayal. It was the unraveling of a lifetime. When people see me now, they don't see the man I really am. They see an old frame wrapped in worn-out clothes, a face carved with lines of time, white hair that never quite lies flat. They see stiff joints that move slower than they should, hands that look like weathered leather, left out in the sun too long. They nod politely at me in grocery lines, or pass me on the sidewalk like I'm invisible. What they never see, what no one sees at first, is the story behind these hands. Every callus is a chapter. Every scar is a ledger of the hours I traded for survival. These fingers have gripped bricks, hammer handles, hot copper wire, and steering wheels at 3 in the morning. They've held sick kids, fixed leaking pipes, and signed eviction notices I was too proud to contest. These aren't the hands of someone who drifted through life. These are the hands of a man who never stopped moving. I started working when I was barely a teenager. By 16, I was carrying bricks on construction sites, learning to balance loads twice my weight on one shoulder. By 25, I was patching drywall by day and wiring basements by night. For nearly 50 years, my body was a machine for other people's gain. Rain, snow, blistering heat, it didn't matter. If there was work to be done, I said yes. But the hardest job I ever had wasn't on any payroll. It was raising Daniel on my own. His mother left when he was just 6. One Monday morning, she kissed his forehead, told him she was going to visit her sister, and never came back. No note to me, no plan, just a torn scrap of paper on the kitchen table. "I can't take this life anymore, sorry." I didn't have the luxury to grieve. The next day, I was knocking on doors, asking for extra shifts, calling every contact I had from old job sites. I still remember standing in front of Mr. Howard's grocery store, patched shirt, mud-caked boots, a mix of desperation and resolve in my chest. He took one look at me and said, "You look like a man who doesn't quit." He was right. I never quit, not when I was exhausted, not when my hands bled, not when my back screamed for rest. Daniel never knew the full extent of what I did to keep us afloat. He saw me leaving before sunrise, coming back long after sunset, sometimes too tired to eat, falling asleep in my chair with my boots still on. What he didn't see were the side jobs, fixing sinks in the neighbors' kitchens at midnight, babysitting their kids for extra dollars, cleaning yards until my knees buckled. He didn't see the times I skipped dinner so he could have a second helping. I told myself it didn't matter if I was invisible. What mattered was that Daniel had shoes that fit, books for school, and food on the table. What mattered was that when he went to bed, the heat stayed on and the lights stayed bright, even if I had to work double shifts to make it happen. I remember one winter when the gas got cut off. I didn't have enough for the bill, so I worked 3 nights straight, hauling drywall just to keep the heat on. Daniel never knew. All he saw was a warm house and his favorite blanket, and I wanted it that way. I can still picture him sitting at that wobbly kitchen table, working on homework by the yellow glow of a cheap lamp, pencil between his teeth, feet swinging off the chair. "Dad," he asked me once, "why don't we have video games like the kids at school?" I swallowed hard and told him, because video games don't teach you how to make it in life. Books do, work does. You keep studying, son, and one day you'll buy whatever you want. He believed me back then. He even promised me that when he grew up, he'd buy us a big house with a yard and fruit trees. I held on to that promise like oxygen. I'd be at some job site, sweat stinging my eyes, thinking about those fruit trees, imagining myself sitting under their shade in old age while Daniel brought me iced tea. That image kept me going, but here's the cruel part. All that sacrifice, those sleepless nights, the meals I skipped so he wouldn't, became invisible to him as he got older. What he saw wasn't a man who gave everything he had. He saw only what I didn't give him: status, prestige, the shiny things other families had. He started comparing me to the fathers of his friends, men in suits, men with clean hands, men who worked in offices. By the time he was a teenager, the gratitude had drained out of his eyes. In its place, embarrassment. He didn't want me showing up at school events in my work boots. He'd make me wait at the end of the block when picking him up, as if being seen with me might stain him. I'd stand there quietly, pretending not to notice. Still, if I could go back, I'd do it all again. Because being his father was the only job I was proud of. I built his life brick by brick, telling myself that someday, when he was grown, he'd look back and understand. He'd see the truth behind my hands, and maybe that's what cuts the deepest. Because that day never came. Instead, the day came when he shoved me out the door, called me dead weight, and acted like the decades I gave him were nothing but a mistake he had to clean up. I think about that moment sometimes, the door slamming behind me, the cold air hitting my face, my 2 bags at my feet. All those years of labor, all those sacrifices distilled into one act of betrayal. People ask me now why I fought so hard in court. Why I didn't just walk away, let him have the money, spend my last years in quiet dignity. The truth is, it wasn't about the money. It was about proving, to him, to the world, maybe even to myself, that my life had value. That persistence meant something. That my story didn't end with me being thrown out like trash. When you look at my hands, you might just see age. But I see every wall I built, every meal I skipped, every promise I kept. And even now, after everything, those hands still work. They still hold on. They still fight, because that's who I am. And no matter how much Daniel tried to erase me, that's who I'll die as. A man who never quit. There was a time when Daniel looked at me like I was his whole world. I can still feel the weight of his head on my shoulder. A small boy with big brown eyes who trusted me for everything. Friday nights were our tradition. I'd get paid from a long week at the job site, and instead of keeping that money tight in my pocket, I'd take him to the corner bakery. We'd split a greasy pizza and a bottle of soda like it was a 5-star meal. I can still hear his little voice, sticky fingers, pointing at the stars through the bakery window. "Dad, when I grow up, I'm gonna buy us a house. A big one. With a yard. And trees. And a garage too. And a washing machine," I'd add, pretending to smile. "So I'll never have to scrub clothes by hand again." We laughed then. We were a team. For a while, that was enough, but something shifted when he hit his teenage years. He stopped looking at me like a hero and started seeing me as a burden. It began small. He didn't want me meeting his friends at the door. He'd tell me to wait in the kitchen while they came in. Then he stopped inviting them over altogether. One night, I overheard him on the phone. "Yeah, my dad's just a laborer." "No, not like an engineer or anything. Just, construction." The word just cut me deeper than any blade ever could. By 16, Daniel's resentment grew sharper. He'd come home from school, toss his bag on the chair and ask, "Why can't you get a better job? Everyone else's parents are bankers, teachers, business owners. You're still carrying bricks at your age." I tried to explain. "I didn't have the chance for school like you, son. But there's no shame in honest work." He laughed bitterly. "There's no pride in it either. I wish I could tell you I snapped at him. I wish I could say I set him straight. But the truth is, I just sat there, staring at my cracked hands on the kitchen table, wondering when my boys started to feel embarrassed by me. That shame of his grew with time. At birthday parties, he'd tell people his father was in building, as if that somehow sounded more respectable. He never introduced me to his girlfriends. Didn't want them seeing the small, rented house or the patched shirts I wore. I still tried to hold on to our bond. I saved up for a second-hand video game console when he was 14. The look on his face when we plugged it in, eyes wide, grinning ear to ear. That was the last time I remember him leaning against me, whispering, "Thanks, Dad, for everything." But once he hit adulthood, it was like that boy vanished. He quit jobs as fast as he got them, blamed me for every failed relationship, every setback. When his girlfriend Isabel left him after 2 months, he came home drunk, shouting, "If we had a real house, if you weren't such a loser, she'd still be here." He stopped seeing me as his father and started seeing me as the excuse for everything wrong in his life. That bond we once had, that promise of fruit trees and big yards, it rotted away, and I was left clinging to the memory of a little boy who used to hold my hand and dream out loud, the man who replaced him. He saw me as nothing more than dead weight long before the lottery came along. The ticket didn't change him. It just gave him the excuse to do what he'd wanted for years, cut me loose. If there's one thing that kept me going through all those years of working myself to the bone, it was routine. Some people cling to prayer, some cling to drink. Me, I clung to numbers. Every Thursday, without fail, I walked down to Howard's bakery. Same route, same time. Same joke from Mr. Howard when he saw me pushing the door open with my work boots still caked in dust. "Here comes my faithful dreamer," he'd say, handing me the slip before I even asked. I always picked the same numbers: Daniel's birthday, my father's death date, the address of our first rented house. A strange mix of grief and hope scribbled in blue ink. I'd hand over my crumpled bills, and Mr. Howard would always write my name and social security number on the back. Store policy to avoid disputes. I've got the proof, too. 20 years of receipts taped into a little blue notebook I kept tucked in my dresser. Every slip dated, signed, all with my name. Edward Miller Daniel used to laugh at me. "You've wasted more money on those numbers than you'll ever win back." Poor people's hope is rich people's illusion, Dad. He didn't understand. For me, those numbers weren't just a gamble. They were a promise to myself that one day luck might finally stop spitting in my face. That one day I wouldn't die with nothing but scars and debts. Sometimes sitting at the kitchen table after work, I'd flip through that notebook, page after page, year after year. Each ticket a small piece of faith glued to paper. I didn't even need to read the dates. I knew them by heart. And here's the irony. The only time Daniel ever came with me to buy the ticket, he mocked me the entire walk. "You know, Dad, if you took all this lottery money and put it in a bank account, you'd have a savings by now." I didn't answer him. But in my head, I thought, "Son, money isn't the only thing we gamble. We gamble our lives every day, on jobs, on people, on family. This is just paper compared to the gamble I took. Raising you alone, that was the only time he touched the ritual until the day everything changed. It was a Thursday in March. My back was shot from a landscaping job. Pain climbing up my spine like fire. I couldn't face the walk to the bakery, so I handed Daniel the cash, looked him dead in the eye and said, "Same numbers." "Same place?" Put my name down. He rolled his eyes, snatched the bills and muttered, "You're addicted, old man." That was the last time I let him handle my ticket. Looking back, I see the trap I walked into. I gave him the money. I gave him the numbers. I gave him the chance to take what wasn't his. But I never gave him the right, because the truth was there. Written in ink on that ticket, Edward Miller. Social Security number ending in 3271. My name. My claim. My hope. The only thing Daniel ever did was mock me for playing. He never believed in it. Until the day those 6 numbers finally hit, and when they did, he thought he could erase me, but I still had the notebook. 20 years of evidence, glued tight, waiting to speak louder than his lies. It was a Friday night in March when the world shifted beneath my feet. I'd just come home from a long day, laying sod for a new housing project. My back was screaming, my feet swollen, and I wanted nothing more than to collapse into my chair with a glass of water. The TV was on in the living room, droning out the local news. And then I heard it, the sound I'd waited 20 years for. The lottery numbers. Tonight's winning numbers are 7, 15, 23, 42, 51, and 58. I froze. My hands trembled. Those weren't just numbers, they were my numbers. The same ones I'd played every single Thursday for 2 decades. Before I could even reach for my blue notebook, Daniel came barreling through the door. His face was lit up like a man possessed. He was clutching a crumpled ticket in his fist, waving it like a golden key. "Dad! I won the lottery." I staggered back, confused. "What do you mean you won?" He shoved the ticket under my nose, and sure enough, the numbers matched. My heart almost gave out right there. The jackpot was real, $4.2 million, but something didn't add up. I looked closer at the ticket, and in the bottom corner, just like always, was the proof. Edward Miller, SSN, ending in 3271, my name. "Not his, Daniel. Where did you get this ticket?" His smile flickered. "What do you mean?" "It's the one from Howard's Bakery. I checked the numbers, Dad. I discovered it. That makes it mine." My blood went cold. "No, I gave you the money. I gave you the numbers. That's my play, son. I've done this every week for 20 years. That ticket is mine." For a moment, I saw panic in his eyes. He knew the truth, but then his face hardened, twisting into something cruel. "You don't understand," he said sharply. "You wouldn't know what to do with that kind of money. You'd blow it on bills, neighbors, church donations. In 2 years it would all be gone. I'm the one who knows how to make it grow." I could barely breathe. "You mean to tell me you're going to steal this from me? From your own father?" He laughed, not nervously, mockingly. "Steal? I'm the one who took it to the store. I'm the one who checked the numbers. I'm the one who's going to cash it. You're an old man. Nobody's going to believe you." That night I barely slept. From my room I heard him pacing, making phone calls, already bragging. "I told you, I won it," he said into his phone. "Yeah, 4.2 million. I'll wire the funds once it clears. Manhattan, maybe. Yeah, classy apartments." Finally moving out of this dump, I sat in the dark, clutching my notebook of receipts, my stomach in knots. He hadn't just taken the money. He was rewriting the story of who I was. He was painting me as a useless, senile old man who didn't deserve the prize I had bled decades for. The next morning, he came into the kitchen dressed in his best clothes, hair slicked with gel, shoes polished like he was going to an interview. He spread some papers on the table. "I went to the bank," he said. "It's complicated, taxes, accounts, legal stuff. Don't worry, I'll handle everything. I'll put the money in my account and give you an allowance each month." I stared at him. "Allowance? I'm your father, not your child. Legally, it might be your ticket, Dad," he snapped. "But practically, I'm the one who can manage it. You'll thank me later." I wanted to tear those papers in half. But I sat there silent because I could see it in his eyes. He wasn't bluffing. He was already gone. The son I raised was no longer in that room. That afternoon, he went to the bank again. By evening, he walked back through the door with the same smug grin, saying the words that shattered me. "It's done. The money's in my account." I still remember the way my hands shook when I pulled out my notebook that night. Page after page of glued receipts, my name scrawled on each one. 18 years of proof. Daniel thought he had erased me. But those slips of paper were my insurance, my evidence, my truth. And as I sat there in the dim kitchen light, listening to him call friends about champagne and penthouses, I realized something. He thought he'd stolen my future. But what he really did was give me a reason to fight. If taking the money was betrayal, what Daniel did next was execution. He didn't just want my winnings. He wanted me gone, out of sight. out of his shiny new life. It started with a folded piece of paper he slapped on the kitchen table one morning. I unfolded it slowly, my stomach tightening as I read the red stamp across the top. Notice to vacate. I looked up at him. "Daniel, what is this?" He leaned against the counter, sipping coffee like it was just another Tuesday. "It's simple. The lease is under my name now. I already talked to the landlord. You've got 2 weeks to move out." My heart dropped. "Move out? This is my home. I've lived here for 15 years. You were still a teenager when we came here," he shrugged. "Exactly. Time to move on. I'll give you $500 a month. Consider it a retirement allowance." His words burned worse than the eviction notice. Retirement allowance. As if I were some pensioner begging for scraps, not the man who had raised him with every drop of sweat in my body. I tried reasoning with him. "Daniel, I've played those numbers for 2 decades. That money is mine. You can't just—" He cut me off with a cold laugh. "Dad, you don't get it." "Nobody cares. The ticket's cashed. The money's in my account. That makes it mine. You can wave around your little notebook all you want, but in the real world, possession is power. And I've got it." That night I barely slept. Every creak of the house felt like it was already saying goodbye to me. I stared at the boxes stacked in the corner of my room. My father's old Bible, Daniel's baby shoes, a stack of faded photographs. The things you can't put a price on. 2 weeks later, he didn't even wait for the notice period. He came into my room, tossed a duffel bag on the bed and said, "Pack, today." I stood there, frozen. "Where am I supposed to go?" He smirked. "Not my problem. You should have thought of that before wasting your life on drywall and lottery slips." He grabbed my arm, his own father's arm, and dragged me toward the front door. His grip was tight, unrelenting. For a second, I saw the 6-year-old boy he used to be, the one who once held my hand when he was afraid of the dark. But that boy was gone. What stood before me was a man I didn't recognize. When the door slammed behind me, the sound echoed like a gunshot, and that's how I found myself on the curb, clutching 2 bags with the weight of 80 years inside them. Neighbors peeked through their curtains, but no one came out. I could see their pity in the slits of their blinds. To them, I was just another old man discarded by the world. I sat there until the streetlights flickered on. My back screamed, my legs ached, and my chest felt hollow. I'd spent my entire life building a foundation for my son, and now he had kicked me off it like dust on his boots. That's when I heard her voice. "Edward." I looked up. Clara Hayes, my neighbor from down the block, stood with a shawl around her shoulders. She'd lived there as long as I had, widowed, kind, the sort of woman who always brought pies to funerals. She looked at me the way a mother looks at a lost child. "What are you doing out here?" she asked softly. I couldn't bring myself to say it. Couldn't admit my own blood had tossed me out. But she saw the eviction notice poking from my pocket. She sighed, shook her head, and held out her hand. "Come on. You're not sleeping on the curb tonight." She made me tea in her kitchen, the smell of chamomile filling the room. For the first time that night, I felt warmth. "Real warmth, Edward," she said firmly. "You can't let him get away with this." I looked down at my hands, still shaking. "What can I do? He's got the money. He's got the lease. He's got everything." But Clara leaned closer. "No, he doesn't have you. And he doesn't have the truth." That's when I remembered the notebook. 20 years of slips, taped down like a timeline of my life. My evidence, my shield, my sword. In that moment, despair cracked and indignation poured in. Daniel had stolen my money, my home, and nearly my dignity. But the one thing he couldn't steal was the truth. And I swore to myself that night, sitting in Clara's warm kitchen, that I would fight. Even if it killed me, I would drag him into the light and make the world see what he did. When Clara slid that steaming cup of tea across the table, I thought she was just offering me kindness. I didn't know she was also offering me a lifeline. "Edward," she said, resting her hand on mine, "you've got more fight left in you than you think. I know someone, a lawyer. She's not cheap, but she's fair. And if anyone can help you, it's her." I shook my head. "Clara, I'm 80 years old. I don't have the money, the strength, or the time for courts." But she didn't flinch. "Then let him walk away with your life's work." "No, Not while you've still got the truth on your side. The next morning she drove me to a small office above a row of shops. The brass plaque on the door read, Rachel Coleman, attorney at law. Rachel was in her 50s, sharp eyes, no-nonsense voice. She didn't waste time on small talk. Clara tells me your son stole your lottery winnings. That true? I slid my blue notebook across her desk. She flipped it open, page after page of taped slips, receipts, each one dated, each one with my name. I even had a few copies of old bakery transaction records from Mr. Howard, complete with his signature and a note, paid by Edward Miller. Rachel leaned back in her chair. You kept all this? 20 years, I said. Every Thursday, she nodded slowly. This isn't just habit. This is evidence. Strong evidence. For the first time in weeks, I felt hope flicker. Rachel explained the uphill battle. Your son already claimed the winnings and transferred them into his account. He'll argue possession, but these slips prove ownership. If we can get witnesses to back you up, Mr. Howard, neighbors who saw you play, we have a case. She wasn't sugarcoating it. Daniel's lawyer will try to tear you apart. They'll say you're senile, that you're misremembering. They'll paint you as an old man chasing fantasies. I looked her in the eye. Let them. I know what I've done, and I've got the proof. Rachel's lips curved into the faintest smile. Good, because that notebook of yours might just be the nail in his coffin. The weeks that followed were a blur of preparation. Rachel gathered affidavits. Mr. Howard swore under oath that he'd sold me tickets every week for 20 years, that the numbers were always mine. Clara gave her statement too, confirming she'd seen me walk to the bakery like clockwork. Rachel even had me practice my testimony. She sat me in a chair, folded her hands, and fired questions like bullets. Mr. Miller, can you prove this was your ticket? Yes, the ticket was in my name. My social security number is printed on the back. Why did your son claim it instead of you? Because I trusted him to buy the ticket that day. He used my money, my numbers, and my name. And why are you fighting for this money? I hesitated, then answered, voice steady. Because it's not just money. It's my dignity. My life's proof that persistence matters. And because I won't let my own son erase me. Rachel studied me for a long moment, then said quietly, Good. That's exactly what a jury needs to hear. Meanwhile, Daniel was living large. I heard through whispers, neighbors, acquaintances, that he was driving a new car, taking trips, flashing cash in bars. He wasn't hiding his victory. He was parading it, convinced I was powerless. One night, through the thin walls of Clara's house, I overheard a call he made on speakerphone while standing outside. His voice carried in the cold air. I'm not worried. He's old. He won't drag me to court. Even if he does, who's going to believe him? I'm the one with the money. Case closed. I sat in the dark by the window, clutching the notebook in my lap. He thought age was weakness. He thought silence meant surrender. But what he didn't know was that silence can be a weapon, and I was about to use mine in the loudest courtroom in the city. The courthouse smelled of old wood and dust, like history itself was watching. I sat at the plaintiff's table in a navy jacket Clara insisted I wear. It was borrowed, a size too big, but it made me look presentable. Across the aisle sat Daniel, polished shoes shining like mirrors, hair slicked back. He looked like money already, or at least like the kind of man who thought it could buy him anything. When the bailiff called the court to order, I felt my pulse slam in my ears. For a moment, I thought I might faint. But then I touched the blue notebook resting on the table beside me, and it steadied me. 20 years of proof. 20 years of sacrifice. I wasn't alone. Judge Whitaker entered, gavel striking. This court will hear the case of Edward Miller versus Daniel Miller regarding disputed lottery winnings. My son didn't even look at me. He leaned toward his lawyer, smirking. To him, this was a formality, a show he was sure he'd already won. Rachel Coleman rose first. Your Honor, my client, Edward Miller, has played the same lottery numbers faithfully for 2 decades. The ticket in question bears his name and social security number. His son, the defendant, wrongfully claimed the winnings. She slid my notebook across to the clerk, who handed it to the judge. Exhibit A, 20 years of receipts and stubs, all consistent. all under the plaintiff's name. I watched Whitaker's eyebrows lift slightly as he thumbed through the pages. Then Daniel's lawyer stood, a slick man in a grey suit, voice smooth as oil. "Your Honor, the defendant acted in good faith. He purchased the ticket. He discovered the winning numbers. My client is simply the one who carried out the transaction. His father, while sympathetic, is unfortunately confused. At his advanced age, memory becomes unreliable. We believe Mr. Miller has misremembered events." There it was. The dagger. "They were going to paint me as senile." Rachel leaned close and whispered, "Hold steady." When it was my turn to testify, I rose slowly, every bone aching. I swore the oath and sat in the witness chair. The courtroom felt hotter than the July sun outside. Rachel began gently. "Mr. Miller, can you tell the court your weekly routine for the past 20 years? "Yes," I said, my voice trembling at first but growing firmer. "Every Thursday, I walked to Howard's bakery. I handed over the same cash, asked for the same numbers, 7. Femine, 23, 42, 51, and 58. Mr. Howard would print the ticket, and by store policy, he'd write my name and my social security number on the back. I taped every receipt in that notebook." She held up the notebook. "And is this your handwriting on the receipts?" "It is," Rachel nodded. "Did you play those numbers the week of March 12th? "I did, but my back was injured, so I gave Daniel the money and told him to place the bet for me in my name. He came back with the ticket. That ticket won!" Murmurs rippled through the courtroom. Daniel's lawyer sprang up for cross-examination. "Mr. Miller, you admit you didn't physically buy the winning ticket, correct?" "Yes, but it was my money, my numbers, my name. Yet it was Daniel who checked the results, Daniel who claimed the prize. Isn't it possible you misunderstood the arrangement?" I met his eyes steady. "No, the ticket itself proves the truth. Look at the back, my name, my SSN. That's not memory, that's fact." For a moment the lawyer faltered. Then he tried a different tack. "Mr. Miller, you've described years of hard work and sacrifice. Isn't it true you're just bitter, resentful that your son succeeded where you could not?" I gripped the arm of the chair. "No, I'm not bitter. I'm heartbroken. Because success doesn't mean stepping on the man who carried you through life. Success without honor is failure. And I won't let my son bury me alive just because I'm old." Silence. Even the judge leaned forward at that. The defense called Daniel next. He strutted to the stand like a celebrity. His testimony was slick, rehearsed lines. "I bought the ticket. I checked the numbers. I did everything. My father, he's old. He doesn't understand finances. He wouldn't know what to do with millions. I did what was best." Rachel rose calmly for cross. "Mr. Miller, is this your father's name on the winning ticket?" "Yes, but is this his social security number?" "Yes, but I was the one who—" "Did you use your own money to purchase it?" Daniel hesitated. "He gave me the cash," Rachel pounced. "So to recap, it was your father's money, his numbers, his name, his social security, his 20 years of receipts, and his notebook of proof. The only thing you contributed was the walk to the bakery." The room buzzed. Daniel's face reddened. Rachel's voice cut sharp as glass. "And after this so-called act of good faith, you evicted your 80-year-old father from his home, offering him a $500 allowance out of millions. Do you deny that?" Daniel's jaw clenched. "He didn't deserve the rest," gasps erupted. The judge banged his gavel. "Order in the court!" But the damage was done. His arrogance had betrayed him. When closing arguments ended, Judge Whitaker spoke slowly, carefully. "The evidence is clear. The ticket belongs to Edward Miller. The defendant's actions were not those of a custodian, but of a usurper. This court rules in favor of the plaintiff. All funds shall be returned to Edward Miller, less applicable legal costs." The gavel struck. The courtroom erupted in murmurs. I sat frozen, tears burning my eyes. Across the aisle, Daniel's face twisted with rage. His perfect suit now a costume of failure. And in that moment, for the first time in years, I felt tall again. When the gavel came down, it didn't sound like justice. It sounded like release. Like chains breaking, Rachel shook my hand firmly, whispering, "You did it, Edward. You stood your ground." Clara hugged me so tightly, I thought my ribs might crack. But all I could do was sit there, staring at the notebook still clutched in my hand. 20 years of little slips of paper had just defeated millions of dollars in arrogance. A month later, the funds were transferred into my account. $3 million after legal fees and taxes. It still looked unreal on the bank statement. I kept pulling it out of the envelope, tracing my name at the top. Account holder, Edward Miller. You'd think I would have gone wild. Bought a car, a mansion, maybe even flown to Vegas. But that was never me. Money had never been about greed. It was about breathing easier, about dignity. The first thing I did was buy back the house Daniel had forced me out of. The landlord was more than happy to sell, and for the first time in my life, I held a deed with my name on it. Not rent, not borrowed walls. Mine. I renovated it slowly. Nothing extravagant, just repairs I'd dreamed of for years. Fresh paint, a new stove, a sturdy roof. I planted roses in the front yard so that when I sat on the porch, I'd smell life instead of mildew. Then I started giving back, quietly. I set up a small scholarship at the local high school named after my late father. Just 5 kids a year, books, tuition, a chance. I donated to the senior center so others wouldn't feel the loneliness I had felt on that cold curb the night Daniel threw me out. Clara joked that I was a millionaire living like a handyman. Maybe she was right. I still ate at the same bakery every Thursday, still drank coffee from a chipped mug, still wore shirts patched at the elbows. But for the first time, I wasn't doing it because I had no choice. I was doing it because I wanted to. One evening, I sat in my new garden with a glass of iced tea, watching the sun dip behind the rooftops. And for the first time in 80 years, I wasn't worrying about bills. I wasn't worrying about food or rent or whether Daniel would ever see me as enough. I was free. Free from the grind that had chewed me up for decades. Free from the shame Daniel had tried to pin on me. Free to be Edward Miller, not just a laborer, not just a father, not just a man scraping by, but a man who survived. A man who won. Neighbors began to look at me differently. Not with pity, but with respect. Mr. Howard the baker even closed his shop early one night just to shake my hand. "I always told you, Eddie," he said with a grin. "Faith pays off. It wasn't the money that changed me. It was the recognition. For years I was invisible. Now people saw me, heard me, admired me, but deep down I knew the real victory wasn't in bank statements or garden roses. It was in the fact that I'd stood up to my own blood and refused to be erased. I thought often about Daniel, the boy who once leaned on my shoulder at the bakery window, pointing at the stars. I wondered if he ever thought about that boy too, or if greed had swallowed him whole. Either way, I knew one thing. My new beginning didn't include him, and as the summer breeze carried the scent of roses across my porch, I realized something simple, something pure. Money hadn't made me rich. Dignity had. It was late autumn when he finally came back. The leaves had turned brittle, crunching underfoot, and the air smelled of smoke from neighbors' chimneys. I was sitting on my porch, watching the roses bend in the wind, when I heard footsteps on the gravel path. I didn't need to look up. I knew that walk, Dad. I turned slowly. Daniel stood there, thinner than I remembered. His expensive suit was gone, replaced by a wrinkled hoodie and scuffed shoes. His hair, once slicked with gel, hung messily over his forehead. His eyes were bloodshot, restless, the eyes of a man who had gambled and lost. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The silence was heavier than any courtroom. He cleared his throat. I messed up. I let the words hang in the air. I wanted him to feel their weight. He shifted uncomfortably. The money's gone. Bad investments. Bad friends? I thought I was smarter than everyone else, but I wasn't. I've got nothing left. No house, no car, no one, just you. I almost laughed. Now he remembered me? After throwing me onto the street, after calling me dead weight. Instead, I asked quietly, "Why are you here, Daniel?" His voice cracked. "Because you're all I have left. I'm sorry, Dad, I really am. Can we start over?" I looked at him, the same boy who once pointed at the stars and promised me fruit trees and a garage. And for a moment, my heart ached for that boy. But the man standing in front of me wasn't that boy anymore. "Daniel," I said, my voice low but firm, "you didn't just take money from me. You tried to erase me." You threw me out of my own home, told the world I was useless. That wound doesn't heal with words." Tears welled in his eyes. "Please, Dad, I've got nowhere else to go." I stood slowly, gripping the porch rail for balance. "You made your choice when you betrayed me, and I made mine when I fought back. I forgive you, Daniel, but forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. And it sure as hell doesn't mean letting you hurt me again." His mouth opened, closed. He looked like a man sinking in quicksand, realizing too late he should have watched where he stepped. "Then what am I supposed to do?" he whispered. "You'll figure it out," I said, my tone as steady as stone. "The same way I figured out how to raise you when your mother left, alone." The wind picked up, scattering leaves across the path between us. For a second I thought he might lash out, yell, try to reclaim the arrogance he once had. But instead, he lowered his head, turned, and walked away. I watched him disappear down the street, swallowed by shadows. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel guilty for letting him go. I sat back down, staring at the roses I had planted with my own hands. The garden didn't care about betrayal. It only cared about sunlight, water, and time. And as the last rays of daylight fell across my porch, I realized I had those things now. The lottery hadn't made me rich. It hadn't bought me love or fixed the scars of the past. What it gave me was freedom. Freedom to live the rest of my days with dignity. Daniel thought he had buried me, but I was still here, stronger than he ever imagined, and that, more than the millions, was my true revenge.